Greetings, my fellow from lovers and sovereign thinkers. This is LL3's newest podcast. My name is Craig, transmitting from the beautiful swampy mangroves of South Florida. And today's date is Monday, January 2nd, 2017. I hope everyone had a great New Year weekend. And please put your thoughts and prayers for the people that suffered that horrific incident in Istanbul, Turkey. And some people may claim it's ISIL and all that. However, I haven't really just looked into it as much, and I do apologize for that. Just wondering if it's organic. If they say it's ISIL, can they say New World Order or Operation Gladio Deluxe, allegedly speaking. So hopefully I will make that chance to check it out. Then I'll give you folks my intake, but not at this time. And I am actually podcasting at CJ's Java Lounge, which is along the beautiful New River of Fort Lauderdale, and it's located at 400 Southwest 1st Avenue, Suite 1. It's right off the corner, right under the Andrews Avenue Bridge. And check it out. And there's a place downtown in Saluna, which is up the road, a historical landmark. So I'm here frequently, and they just started out November. And make sure, check in. They got decent sandwiches, decent little food, little coffee shop. So if you're tired of the whole corporate franchise trying to take over in the cafe industry, you should check out the small mom and pop places like this facility. And they do have happy hour with some microbrewery beers. And instead, they're not too bad. It's a bunch of young folks here trying to be successful. So, hey, help the economy by supporting local markets, okay? All right. Well, I was observing what I want to do, and I have taken the initiative on doing a few things here. Yeah, it'd be four things here, viewpoints, and this one activist post, but mainly Free Thought Project, 10th the New Eastern Outlook, and of course to the Mem Center, they all putting their information on activist posts, which is great because everyone's really working together on pursuing the information war. So so first I'm gonna be excuse me here. So first I'm gonna be looking at it is by Claire Burnish. This one's entitled 2016 How Truth Was Destroyed So You'd Buy the Government's Propaganda. Like it says here, we're an empire now, Coral Grove, nefariously asserted in 2004. And we create our own reality. And while you're studying that reality judiciously as you will act again, creating other new realities, which you can study too. And that's how things will sort out. We're history's actors, and all of you, will be left just to study what we do. How manly is that, right? Rhode might have said that 12 years ago, but the words hauntingly describe our situation in 2016. Oxford Dictionaries incidentally named post-truth the International Word of the Year, which facsimile relative truth debate and falsely premise war on fake news. Orwell must be rolling in his grave. In fact, given these telling circumstances, perhaps Oxford Dictionaries didn't go far enough. This year epitomizes a new era of post-coherence. Rove and his ilk, the dynasties Bush and Clinton, reigning power for nearly 30 years, but chuckle behind closed doors as Americans quarrel savagely. The authenticity of falsehoods and facts alike. The ostensibly everything now up in the air. The U.S. power apparatus has inarguably created a new reality, one which doubt has still been so instilled as to obstruct and thought the decimation of accurate factual information. The purposeful manipulation of perception, in other words, does exactly what Rove and the aptly termed history actors intend. It keeps the rest of us confused and barely bitterly arguing over what's actually going on, which that's true. You have to, like I said, as I always tell people, I always tell people, observe responsibly. That's even on my Spreaker page too and Twitter account. So online communication facilitated this madness exponentially. It's doubtful such disorientation would have occurred decades ago when social media didn't have critical influence. Yes, if you're hearing music in the background, don't worry, I'm not licensed or sanctioning this tunes, okay? Nothing wrong with it at all. All right, says here, of course, this tumult and turbulence isn't manufactured without reason. It allows the surreptitious and sometimes flagrant distribution of propaganda favorable to the American political establishment to circulate largely unhindered. But those aspects of post-coherent unintentionally also give rise to a furious backlash. The internet might facilitate confusion and propaganda, but it it is, after all, a global library of information, and wary independent alternative media outlets immediately tear apart false information published by collusive corporate media prostitutes. With all of this in mind, the following are just a smattering of many outrageous examples of how the fake news narrative brought us post-truth, intentionally shaping the events of 2016 and promises to continue the inanity far into the future. Perhaps the most laughable fake news came to us courtesy of CNN's Chris Cuomo, who warned the planet amid ongoing publication by WikiLeaks of documents and delirious to the credibility of the Democratic establishment to remember. It is illegal to possess these stolen documents. It is different. It's different for the media, so everything you can learn about this, you're learning from us. Welcome to Bizarro World, right? Cuomo's conspicuous ploy to limit the spread of the actual document and win CNN initial reader and viewership constituted a reckless foray into censorship of information. Of course, CNN didn't proclaim the leaked emails verboten for nothing. The outlet bears snarkily moniker. Clinton News Network and its parent company, Time Warner, donated over $400,000 to Hillary Clinton's campaign and was exposed by alternative media countless times for cutting off reporters who dare criticize its darling candidate on report on revealed corruption. Ha ha. Further, the CNN's pernicious claim came as a document revealed the outlet and others colluding with the Clinton campaign to report news portraying Democrats in a favorable manner. Of course, those who took Cuomo's warning to heart and relied solely on the Clinton News Network would would never know the pertinent detail. Other mainstream outlets coordinated with the Clinton camp, struggling to accurately report the contents of the WikiLeaks documents when they bothered covering the revelations. Corporate propaganda spin machines seem to be in overdrive for the duration of the Clinton election cycle, as has reached a level of absurdity following Donald Trump's win. Because, according to corporate media, who ignore the depth of corruption exposed by WikiLeaks, the election of Trump was so anomalous. There had to be an explanation beyond the fact the American people didn't find Hillary qualified for the job. Enter the Russians, taking cues from the era of McCarthyism and the new Red Scare with Bullhorn is the once illustrious Washington Post who first posted it without any evidence, saying statements from unnamed CIA officials that the intelligence community has reached a consensus. Russian hackers had interfered in the election to install Trump. Famously, the lockstep in the New York Times quickly parroted their same assertion if it were still truth. Neither outlet, however, bothered consulting officials from the from the 16 other agencies comprising the U.S. intelligence community. In its actuality, no such consensus had been reached, not even inside the CIA. Shortly after the post-shameful scare piece was published, the FBI came to forward to denounce the Russian hacking theory as fuzzy and ambiguous, showing the lack of cohesion amongst intelligence officials, as well as the rush to shirk blame for the lost election. WikiLeaks itself, the one organization with insider information, has vociferously and repeatedly denied their source hacked anything is not Russian and that the documents were leaked by an insider. Nonetheless, the news of report went viral, and further current administration's agenda both paint Russia as the villain and Trump as having somehow stolen the election. Indeed, the utterly unproven Russian hackers they provide the impetus for President Obama to an embarrassing diplomatic meltdown this week, announcing the expulsion of 35 Russian diplomats, sanctions, and shuttering the two compounds owned by Russia. Well, you could say this, Barry Soetoro, bend over Bob, globalist butt boy that you are, or I gotta say, globalist bend over Bob to the New World Order. That'd be a lot better. You want to create sanctions? You want to go to Russia? You go on the front line. You can take your wife and kids with you and see how tough and macho you really are. Okay? I will continue on here. While that move could have easily brought the two superpower nations yet closer to military conflict, Russian President Vladimir Putin allowed cooler heads to prevail, went against the fear of other officials, and announced that there will be no diplomatic tit or tat. No United States diplomats would be expelled from Russia. Incidentally, the mainstream press jumped the gun again, publishing the statements of Russian officials claiming the country would be mirroring moves by the U.S. before Putin announced Russia would not be stooping to such diplomatic pettiness. With these points show the unseemly power of misinformation and make the corporate media a soft target to ridicule. It's imperative to understand these false and misleading news items amount to government propaganda. The more the public buys a preferred narrative, the easier it would be to shove unsavory actions, including war, down our throats. Labeling some of 200 independent and alternative outlets as Russian propagandists and fake news was another feat the Post underhandedly managed in 2016. And thanks to its efforts, Obama officially wrote into law, in essence, Ministry of Propaganda to positively combat foreign state disinformation. Of course, considering the Post owner, Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos, has received $600 million in CIA funds, albeit ostensibly for a standalone project. This hardly comes as a shock. Well, well, well. See, pros and cons of Amazon. With the truth in the balance, 2016 seemed to be a year plucked straight from the pages of George Orwell's 1984, perhaps lightly edited by Aldous Huxley. We don't need censorship from Facebook's neoliberal fake news slayers or the U.S. Ministry of Truth. But in this new era of post-coherence, the masses fell for the trick and now believe themselves incapable of discerning fact from fiction, despite still accessible, voluminous information available on the internet. If the somnolent masses were coherent enough to see through the ploy, freedom of speech in the press wouldn't currently hang in the balance. An idiotic need to be spoon-fed information could quash the institutions at the heart of our supposedly free society. However, until the government acts more drastically, we still have independent media whose integrity has a phenomenal track record of refusing to publish bogus information or retracting any items later found to be mistaken. In the very near future, without hawk-like vigilance, dissenting information and reports accurately depicting corruption epidemic, and government may become a thing purely of the past. And you could get this original link from her on the freethoughtproject.com. Yes, that's why I said earlier on my video I did on New Year's Day about the information war. And I do see a tide turning. It's gonna be a wild ride regardless. 2016 was insane. 2017 expect a lot more or the same when it comes to the war and information and spiritual conflicts. We cannot. People are learning to break that cycle. Many of them are still manifested with it with the government's propaganda. However, others are learning to counter it and taking the initiative on doing their own homework, which is very good. So all you folks out there that are doing this, it doesn't matter what avenues, keep the fire lit. One flame could light a million. Absolutely. This is why when Sandy Madam says it doesn't take the majority to change things, but a handful of people can create brush fires of freedom or liberty. It's one of those two words. So anything can happen. So keep on the rebellious fight on the war of information. And I salute all you folks out there. And this is really good what Claire did as well on this particular article. All right, next one here. Originally came from the New Eastern Outlook by Tony Cortelluzzi. And it's here, Syria's war was only ever the beginning. With the liberation of the city of Aleppo in northern Syria, it appears that the Syrian government in Damascus is on its way to ending the highly destructive conflict now ongoing for nearly 6 years. But to assume the Syrian conflict is on the verge of resolution is to assume the Syrian conflict was fought in a geopolitical vacuum, disconnecting from regional and even global agendas. In fact, the proxy war in the West waged on Syria was considered for years before it began, during its planning and preparation stages, as the only prerequisite war with Iran and a greater global conflict to prevent reemergence of Russia and the rise of China. U.S. hegemony seeks to eliminate the rising powers. At the close of the Cold War, the U.S. sought to establish and maintain itself as the world's sole superpower. U.S. Army General Wesley Clark in 2007 Florida TV talk titled Time to Lead would reveal this post-Cold War agenda by relating a conversation he had as early as 1991 under the Secretary of Defense for Policy, Paul Wolfowitz, by stating emphasis added. Yeah, so be back in a moment. Sorry about that. My dog was like sniffing food. It looks like there's some gentleman over here was making BLT sandwich and some turkey, and it looks like my little dog Jake was like aroused by it. Okay. Okay, I will continue on here. I said, Mr. Secretary, you must be pretty happy with the performance of the troops in Desert Storm. He said, well, yeah, he said, but not really. He said, because the truth is we should have gotten rid of Saddam Hussein and we didn't. And this was just after Shia uprising in the March of 91, which we had provoked, and then we kept our troops on the sidelines and didn't intervene. And he said, but one thing we did learn, he said, we learned that we can use our military in the region, the Middle East, and the Soviets won't stop us, he said. And he got about 5 or 10 years to clean up those all Soviet regimes, Syria, Iran, Iraq, before the next great superpower comes to challenge us. Yeah. You know what's funny about that? As I remember, in 2004, Michael Moore endorsed General Wesley Clark for President of the United States. Something to think about, yeah? All right. I'll continue on here. Revealed in General Clark's statement is a clear, singular agenda beginning after the war and evident with Desert Storm, the conflict in the Balkans, the U.S. invasion and occupation of Afghanistan, and the U.S. invasion and occupation of Iraq, as well as the overall expansion of U.S. military power projection predicated upon the war on terror following the attacks on New York City and Washington, D.C. on September 11, 2001. All hail to the empire, right? America's regime change spree included not only the above-mentioned wars, but also a series of so-called color revolutions across Europe. This includes UPPOR's activities between 1998 and 2004 in Serbia, the 2003 Rhodes Revolution in Georgia, and the 2004-2005 Orange Revolution in Ukraine. Those involved in these U.S. backed up regime change operations, both within the U.S. State Department and the American private industry, the corporate media and IT giants like Facebook and Google, as well as activists from each respective nation, would begin in 2008. The to train opposition leaders from across the Arab world ahead of the 2011 U.S. engineered Arab Spring. The U.S. Department itself, in a 2008 press release, would admit to organizing a Alliance Youth Movement Summit, admitting the Alliance Youth Movement had organic beginnings in the sense that already youth movements from around the world that were utilizing online, mobile, and digital media were interacting to discuss best practices. The State Department acted as a facilitator to help provide some structure to this trend by partnering with entities like Facebook, Howcast, Google, MTV, and Columbia Law School. Discussed throughout the dialogue featured in the press release were very tactics used to serve as cover for inevitability, violent regime change operations from Egypt and Libya to Syria and Yemen, and a look at attendance of the U.S. Department's Alliance of Youth Movement Summits revealed to many groups of the spearheaded protest upon returning home to the Middle East, including the April 6th youth movement in Egypt. Eventually, the New York Times, in an article titled "U.S. Group Helped Nurtured Arab Uprisings," would admit a number of groups and individuals directly involved in the revolts and reforms sweeping regions from including the April 6th youth movement in Egypt, the Bahrain Center for Human Rights, and grassroots activists like Esner Quadi, a youth leader in Yemen, received training and financing from groups and like the International Republican Institute, the National Democratic Institute, and Freedom House, a non-profit human rights organization based in Washington, D.C., according to interviews in recent weeks and American diplomatic cables obtained by WikiLeaks. The goal of both directed military intervention and U.S. engineered color revolutions was to fulfill precisely what General Clark claimed U.S. policymakers sought since the end of the Cold War: the elimination of states operating independently that might eventually rival American global hegemony. The destruction of Iraq, the 2006 Israeli war on Hezbollah, and in southern Lebanon, and the continuous efforts to isolate and topple the government in Tehran were all part of the singular agenda. Throughout U.S. policy papers stretching back for years, it was admitted that the key to ultimately toppling Iran that was destruction of Hezbollah in Lebanon and the elimination of Syria as an Iranian ally. In the 2007 Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Samara Hersh, in his article "The Redirection is the Administration's New Policy Benefiting Our Enemies in the War on Terrorism," will reveal the emphasis added. To undermine Iran, which is predominantly Shiite, the Bush administration has decided, in effect, to reconfigure in its priorities in the Middle East. In Lebanon, the administration has cooperated with Saudi Arabia's government, which is Sunni, the Khalistan operations that are intended to weaken Hezbollah, the Shiite organization that is backed by Iran. The U.S. has also taken part in clandestine operations aimed at Iran and its ally Syria. A byproduct of these activities, which has been bolstering of Sunni extremist groups that espouse militant vision of Islam and are hostile to America and sympathetic Al-Qaeda. In the U.S. in 2009, U.S. corporate financier-sponsored geopolitical policy think tank, the Brookings Institution, would publish a 170-page report, Which Path to Persia? Options for a New American Strategy Towards Iran, which has proposed several options, including having Israel attack Iran on Washington's behalf. This report states emphasis. The Israelis may want U.S. help with a variety of things. Israel may be more willing to bear risk of Iranian retaliation and international opprobrium than the United States, but it is not invulnerable and may request certain commitments from the United States before it's ready to strike. For instance, the Israelis may want to hold off until they have a peace deal with Syria in hand, assuming that Jerusalem believes that one is within reach, which would help to mitigate blowback from Hezbollah and potentially Hamas. Consequently, they might want Washington to push hard, mediating between Jerusalem and Damascus. So, something to look at. And there's all the links are on there too, so you can really examine this yourself. More imperialism, New World Order 101. But I will continue on here. It is clear that no peace deal would be struck, and instead the wholesale destruction of Syria would be orchestrated. Many other proposals presented in the Brookings report in regarding to triggering conflict and regime change in Iran were instead used on Syria. With the U.S.-led destruction of Libya in 2011 through the use of al-Qaeda-linked militants and transformation of the eastern Libyan city of Benghazi into a logistical springboard to Turkey's border with Syria. The proxy invasion of Syria began amid already ongoing clashes in the nation's urban centers. By 2012, militants flooded over the Turkish-Syrian border and invaded the city of Aleppo. Destructive war has ravaged the nation, drawn in Syria's allies, Hezbollah and Iran, as well as Russia, and may sufficiently weaken the coalition ahead of the conflict's expansion eastward into Iran and even southern Syria. So the whole thing is the whole song and dance, same thing, different package. Kio bono, who benefits, right? Absolutely. Look who's in office just in time with Iran. President-elect Donald Trump has to run himself with not only pro-Israeli headliners like David Friedman, but also a circle who have for years advocated war with Iran, including Breitbart News, Stephen Bannon, and retired U.S. Marine Corps General James Mattis. A similar circle of policymakers who undoubtedly have accompanied 2016 U.S. presidential candidate and former U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton into office, as well as had she won the election, her time as U.S. Secretary being consumed with destruction of Libya and Syria prerequisites for this very conflict. In essence, Washington is positioning itself for a wider confrontation with Iran, just as its proxy war in Syria appears to have run in its full course, and would have begun positioning itself for this coming war regardless who won the 2016 presidential election. In all likelihood, U.S. policymakers envision Syria following much faster for a lesser cost. With Russia basing a significant military presence in the nation, and with Syria's military distilled down to a highly effective, experienced fighting force, and with Iranian and Hezbollah forces having gained experience fighting a regional conflict, moving the conflict into Syria will be no easy task. It perhaps because of this that the President-elect Trump has been presented as potentially ally of Russia And the accusations of Russia hacking American elections are being used to chill the alternative media under the guise of combating fake news. With the alternative media muzzled, would be difficult for the U.S. policymakers to once again engineer a large provocation, as Brookings, which passed the Persia report, recommended to justify expanding Syria's conflict and America's involvement into Iranian territory. Territory? That's the question. It should also be noted systematically throughout the Syrian conflict. Israel has attacked Hezbollah infrastructure throughout Lebanon and Syria. Israeli policymakers are likely attempting to maintain a buffer zone between themselves and those who would retaliate in the wake of U.S.-backed Iranian attack on Iran, just as Brookings proposed in 2009. Elections. So the whole thing is like same old scenario. Grand chessboard related material. All right, I'll go on here. Elections won't beat U.S. Hegemony, only a multipolar balance of power. U.S. special interests since the end of the Cold War have been consumed with confronting and eliminating any threat to their perceived global hegemony. As retired U.S. Army General Wesley Clark warned for years, the U.S. is pursuing a singular agenda since the 1990s, one indifferent to who is in the White House and what rhetoric is being used to sell the myriad of wars and color revolutions required to incrementally achieve and maintain global hegemony. As Russia and China reintroduce a global balance of power, checking U.S. aggression and rolling back U.S. hegemony. Hopefully, I got that pronounced that word right. The more proportional multipolar role upon the world stage. The U.S. has increasingly reacted with direct confrontations with both Moscow and Beijing, as well as an increasingly violent campaign of proxy wars and regime change operations worldwide. The illusion that a presidential election could derail the singular decades-long agenda is a dangerous one. The reality, the only obstacle between the U.S. special interests and achieving global hegemony are competing centers of power. These include nation-states like Russia and China, or the grassroots movements like the alternative media and alternative and disruptive economic models and political movements built on power and influence such movements achieve. Such alternatives can undermine the unwarranted power and influence currently enjoyed by the U.S. and the corporate finance monopolies that dominate its political landscape. So, like I said, it's more countering with the information and truth. Truth will be on our side. This is the one thing you got to start looking at. What's going to be their next step? I know a lot of folks there are real happy that Donald Trump won. Others are like real angry. However, there's other individuals like myself. We have to still be vigilant and examine what they're going to do. Like, who's gonna hire? How's it gonna be approved, etc. We gotta put all their feet to the fire, and like everyone else is doing, getting people to think, plant those seeds. Tired of this imperialism. It is unacceptable. Many of us in the United States are tired of it. Tired of being the patsies for the New World Order. This is how I examine these events. Because when you start doing the research, you can really start grasping. And remember, you're never too old to learn, okay? So keep up the good fights, my friends, wherever you're at. If you're dumb, stagnant, and happy, then you're part of the problem rather than the solution. And one more thing, if you complain and don't take action, shut up. All right, carry on. I'm digressing. All right, it says here, this one here is from the 10th Amendment Center. This is by Mike Meharry. Rhode Island legalizes hemp, sets foundation to nullify federal prohibition. Today, a law went into effect legalizing the production and processing of industrial hemp for commercial purposes in Rhode Island, setting the foundation to nullify federal prohibition in practice. A coalition of 5 Democrats introduced House Bill 8232 on May 19th. As introduced, the legislation would only allow state licensed representatives of the Narragansett Indian tribe to produce, possess, distribute, and commercially trade industrial hemp. In a rapid series of events, the bill was amended in the House Committee of Health, Education, and Welfare to apply to everybody. On June 17th, the House passed the amended bill 7-1 to 0. The Senate concurred the next day by a 26-7 margin, with Governor Gina Raimoንdo's signature will go into effect January 1st, 2007. Under the law, industrial hemp is now treated as an agricultural crop, subject to regulation by the Rhode Island Department of Business Regulation. The legislation reads in part, hemp is an agricultural product which may grow as a crop, produce, possess, distribute, and commercially trade it pursuant to the provisions of this chapter. The Department of Education, the department shall adopt rules to provide the implementation of the chapter, which shall include rules to require hemp to be tested during the growth for THC levels and require inspection of hemp during sowing, growing season, harvest, storage, and processing. The law prohibits the business of regulation from adopting any rules that would prohibit a person or entity from growing or distributing hemp based on the legal status of hemp under federal law. Language in the bill acknowledges federal prohibition on hemp, but correctly asserts the state can legally dictate its own policy notwithstanding federal law. The states are not required to enforce federal law or prosecute people for engaging in activities prohibited by federal law. Therefore, compliance with the chapter does not put the state of Rhode Island in violation of federal law. Federal Farm Bill. So this is pretty good. I like this a lot. And this is another step towards freedom on hemp, marijuana, etc. So I am very pleased with that. So let's just see what happens here. It says Federal Farm Bill. In early 2014, President Barack Obama signed a new farm bill into law, which included a provision allowing a handful of states to begin limited research programs growing hemp. The Hemp Amendment allows state agricultural departments, colleges, and universities to grow hemp, defined as a non-drug oilseed and fiber varieties of cannabis for academic or agricultural research purposes, but it applies only to states where industrial hemp farming is already legal under state law. In short, current federal law authorizes the farming of hemp by research institutions only for research only. Farming for commercial purposes by individuals and businesses remain prohibited. New Rhode Island law ignores federal prohibition and authorizes commercial farming in production anyway. So they use a total 10th Amendment stance on that law. So that's very good. I like that. Okay, other states, by rejecting any need for federal approval, H. 8232 sets the stage to nullify the federal hemp ban in practice. Rhode Island can now join with other states, including Colorado, Oregon, Maine, Massachusetts, California, and Vermont, that simply ignore federal prohibition and legalize industrial hemp production within their state borders. Was a prospective hemp growers will still have to take federal law into consideration. By eliminating the state requirement for federal permission, the Rhode Island law would clear away a major obstacle to widespread commercial hemp farming within the borders of the state. Farmers in southeast Colorado started harvesting in the plant in 2013, and farmers in Vermont began harvesting in 2014, effectively nullifying federal restrictions on such agricultural activities. On February 2nd, 2105, or 2015, yeah. It looks like they really screwed up on the date there. The Oregon hemp industry officially opened for business, and 1 week later, the first license went to a small nonprofit group. As more people engage in hemp production, the market grows within the states, more people will become albinon, creating an exponential wave, ultimately nullifying the federal ban in effect. Huge market for hemp. According to a 2005 Congressional Research Service report, the U.S. is the only developed nation that hasn't developed an industrial hemp crop for economic purposes. Experts suggest that the U.S. market for hemp is around $600 million per year. They count, sorry about that, they count as many as 25,000 users for industrial hemp, including food, cosmetics, plastics, and biofuel. The U.S. is currently the number one importer of hemp fiber for various products, with China and Canada acting as two exporters in the world. During World War II, the U.S. military relied heavily on hemp products, which resulted in the famous campaign government-produced film "Hemp for Victory," which that's a fact. You can see it. You can see it's like a 6-minute video. I've seen it. So, the new law in Rhode Island represents an essential first step toward hemp freedom in the state of Rhode Island. And you know what? That is fantastic. I give them credit for making this happen, and thank you. Absolutely. Got to give them a little round of applause, because they have deserve it. And that's why sometimes in these states, I'm not too keen with some of their actions. But when they do something right, I give them the thumbs up, man. And we got to just, I think, the state of Florida, a lot of these states need to start doing that as well. Industrialize hemp. And biofuel is one of them. I support that as well. Why create pipelines? Why we can industrialize hemp. Plain and simple, correct? Absolutely. All right, this one here, finally, I'm going to be reading. Well, a little intake on by Bionic Mosquito. Lou Rockwell put this on his webpage. It says here, National Socialism Bad. And let's read what it has to say here. George Soros is at it again. Don't blame him for the calamities facing the various countries of the West. It is all Germany's fault. It is all Putin's fault. It has nothing to do with crony capitalism and central banking. It has nothing to do with his open border refugee immigration initiatives. Nothing to do with bringing freedom through warfare and invasion throughout North Africa, the Middle East, Central Europe, and Central Asia. Nope. Nothing to do with any of the causes that he supported. Instead, the fault lies with those who have opposed these causes. He opens with his memory of growing up in Hungary under Hitler's Germany. This so the imagery wouldn't be missed when he writes later of Trump and the various similar voter rebellion and national movements coming in Europe. You see, it is quite simple. Everyone not on George's side is Hitler, or maybe Putin. Well, since Putin is also Hitler, I guess we can just keep it simple and say anyone not on George's side is Hitler. you gotta get this. This is great stuff. I like it so far. Now that he has placed the reader in the right frame of mind, George offers there's also two kinds of political regimes. The good kind, where people elect leaders who kindly look after their interests. The bad kind, where rulers manipulate their subjects to serve as the rulers. Not third choice. What about the ugly kind, where subjects pretend their vote matters, where every option on the ballot equates to being controlled, where in reality they are voting for the name of their next manipulator in chief? Before a sentient being would have a chance to throw up all over, as excuse me here. Yeah, possibilities he offers a classification considered to be too simplistic. Duh. Yet he still promotes a former and not later. It seems George can conceive of any other possibility. What he calls the open societies are today in crisis. So-called closed societies are on the rise. He asked, how does this happen? He suggests that elected leaders fail to meet voters' expectations, leading to voters to becoming disenfranchised. What were these failures? According to George, first on his list is the lack of redistributive policies. Consider this. Voters are rejecting the establishment because there is not enough welfare and socialism. Not just any welfare and socialism, it, and as that has already been accomplished in virtually every developed country, but a special kind of welfare and socialism. You see, Europe has additional problems. He offers that he was a supporter of the European Union from the outset. The problem, after the crash of 2008, the relationship didn't work so well because the creditors decided they didn't want to pursue international socialism by subsidizing the debtors. George blames the Germans. To be clear, George doesn't like Hitler's National Socialism, instead wanted to replace it with international socialism. Poor Germans. Damn if they do and damn if they don't. Germans should have looked beyond their national interests. They made the same mistake in the good old National Socialism, aka Nazi days. Instead, the Germans should take a page from the Comintern International Socialism. National Socialism bad. International Socialism good. George then points to the rise of the anti-EU movements. He offered no reasons, no background, as if these movements came out to the blue, sprung up from the nothingness, as if God declares it on the sixth day. Such movements threaten to elect nationalist leaders in many European countries. He says not just as it happened in with the election of a con artist as the president of the United States. A con artist for president can stand in line, buddy. There have been at least 30 or 40 already. Americans have a 200-year history of electing con artists. The Germans, nationalism, con artists, and anti EU sentiment. So far, the only reason George offers for all of this backlash is because the Germans and voters throughout the West will not support international socialism. Nothing to see here, folks. Move along. George then moves to Putin. Bad Vlad. Exploiting the social media companies, deploying his fake news outlets, spreading this misinformation. George offers no example of this misinformation. For example, George could have pointed out any of the following facts. Because you should consider call him Jorge Soros, right? Let's read these facts here. The relative distance of Ukraine, the Baltics, Poland, and the Balkans from Moscow and Washington, D.C. The freedom of all Libyans and Syrians enjoy today after being offered revolution. The stability in Iraq and Afghanistan after a decade and a half of Western-style nation building. That the South China Sea is really close to Catalina Island. The benefit offered to the masses by central banking. That leak, not likely hacked, emails are fake, planet lies, only to embarrass Hillary and the Democrats. Just a few such facts will go a long way to bolstering George's claim. George sees Putin exploiting upcoming elections in the Netherlands, Germany, Italy, and France. Putin is going to be going to hypnotize the voters in every country in the West. There is the German legend of the Rotterwanger von Hallam. Putin apparently holds similar skills. What doesn't George mention? Not a peep about open borders immigration. He mentions the refugee crisis only once and only passing in the closing paragraph. Never liking this to the reasons for disillusionment, nor identifying his support for these disastrous policies. As if his editor said, George, it will be laughable if you write about the backlash of the people against the elite, especially in Europe, not to mention as one of the causes, the refugee crisis. George properly chastised did his best to hide it. Conclusion, international socialism. This is George's position, an interim objective, but it's only a passage to the road to his desire, one world government. Voila. Self-explanatory, my friends. That's what Jorge wants, a new world order. One world governmental order. But you know what? But how great things are going right now, he's just delirious and infuriated with more people are seeing the bigger picture than ever before. And you know what? I think this is incredible. So just keep plugging away, my friends, and don't believe the deception, the rhetorical deception of Jorge Soros, a genuine tyrannical gyno, which I stand for Jew or Judaic in name only. Okay? So you can't say I'm anti-Semitic. All right, my friends, that is all for now. I'd like to thank everyone for listening to this episode. Plus, feel free to download and share this throughout your social media networks, including the rest of my archive. Have any questions, comments, or you want to send me something that's interesting and may want to check out, you can hit me on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Tumblr, YouTube, Freedoms Network, Scene.life, and Minds.com, which I'm going to post this on my show. All right? Whatever you do, please send your correspondences with decorum. Or you can email me at LokiLuck3, which is LokiLuck and the number 3 all together at gmail.com. Well, I'm not going to be playing any music, so we're going to do the outro, which is a NightRock version of a song called Indifferent by AKnewGod, which is royalty free. And I got one person thank me for telling them I should post it on my YouTube, but just hit my Spreaker page. All's all on there. So you can hit that link. Bam, it's all on there. And hey, you know what to do. Send me some input and keep plugging away. Okay, my friends? Once again, thank you for your time. Plus, always remember that demoniac resistance is healthy for the soul and can liberate humanity. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Keep on spreading the love, and may your guardian spirits be with you.